"Mary, it's me," he said, his voice a ghost from the past. It had been a decade since my ex-husband and our son's wife vanished into thin air after eloping. I'd buried thoughts of them deep within, avoiding the pain they left behind. But now, unexpectedly, his voice pierced through the years. "I'm going to move into your parents' place. You're still there, aren't you?" His demand was as startling as it was unwelcome. "I'm sorry for the abruptness, but you need to vacate my home," he insisted, leaving no room for negotiation. His request caught me off guard. A decade had passed since we last exchanged words, and his sudden reappearance left me bewildered. What could he possibly want now, after all this time? And why was he asking to move into my parents' home with his unfaithful partner? "Still bunking with the folks, huh? Any new spouses since we last talked?" His inquiry dripped with a mix of curiosity and condescension. "Get out of there pronto." Anger surged within me for the first time in a decade, fueled by his audacity to mock me further. Little did he know, my living arrangements had changed drastically over the years. "Sorry, but if you're eyeing my parents' place, you're out of luck," I retorted. "Huh?" His confusion was palpable, a stark contrast to the rage boiling within me. I made it clear to him that after a decade, my determination had only grown stronger. "Mary Kane, 60 years old, and still teaching part-time at a private school," I asserted. Despite being at retirement age, I persisted with my part-time work, albeit with a reduced salary. My admiration for my parents, both esteemed educators, stemmed from cherished memories of my childhood. Their influence fueled my ambition to follow in their footsteps. There was a time when I had a husband, Stephen, but that chapter ended in divorce a decade ago, and now, out of the blue, he resurfaced after all these years of estrangement. Stephen and I first crossed paths in college, back when I was just 21, juggling part-time teaching at a tutoring center with my studies in education. Stephen, a fresh face at the tutoring center, had recently stepped into the role of a part-time teacher. Despite his seniority in years, it fell upon me with my longer tenure to mentor him as directed by the center's director. As I guided him through the ropes, our camaraderie blossomed into a close friendship, which eventually bloomed into something more. 3 years of courtship later, we exchanged vows and welcomed our son Michael into the world. With graduation came a full-time teaching position for me, prompting my departure from the tutoring center. Our journey together as a family was just unfolding, filled with promises of a bright future. 25 years flew by, witnessing Michael find love in Sarah, whom he'd met during his studies at a design school in New York. We rejoiced in their union, hopeful for the happiness they would build together as a couple. Then, unexpectedly, Michael returned home, burdened with something he needed to share. "Mom, you're still married to Dad, right?" His question, though seemingly innocuous, stirred a mix of emotions within me as I welcomed him back, the worry beginning to settle in. "I spotted Dad strolling through Brooklyn with Sarah," Michael disclosed. "Okay," I replied, my mind racing with disbelief. According to Michael, he caught sight of Sarah and Dad arm in arm last Friday night in Brooklyn's bustling hotel district. Suspicion gripped him, prompting him to tail them discreetly. His surveillance led him to witness them disappear into a hotel. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Despite being in-laws, Stephen and Sarah shared a bond akin to that of a father and daughter. The notion of them meeting privately, let alone in a hotel, seemed unfathomable. I clung to the hope that it was a misunderstanding or a nightmare, but Michael's evidence shattered that illusion. The image on Michael's phone screen depicted a crystal-clear snapshot of Dad and Sarah entering the hotel arm in arm, unmistakably captured on a Friday night. Dad's excuse of overtime at the office crumbled in the face of this damning proof. Additionally, I couldn't shake off the memory of Stephen's frequent late arrivals home over the past few months. His explanations vary from happy hour gatherings with colleagues to sudden business trips or urgent work demands on holidays. Initially, I accepted his excuses without much skepticism, but upon closer reflection, I realized these occurrences had become more frequent lately. There seemed to be a pattern emerging, one that made me increasingly uneasy. Could these excuses be a cover for spending more time with Sarah? Requesting Michael to forward the image, I assured him I would confront his father before bidding him good night. Anticipation gnawed at me as I awaited Stephen's return home that evening. When he finally arrived, the scent of alcohol clung to him, aggravating my nerves. Summoning my courage, I approached him directly. "Stephen, Michael mentioned something today. Did you meet Sarah last Friday?" Yeah, he stammered, his response lacking conviction. We did cross paths briefly. We chatted a bit, I think. His sudden alertness and the shift in his gaze didn't escape my notice. Sensing my apprehension, he countered with a question of his own. What exactly did he tell you? He mentioned spotting you and Sarah entering a hotel in Brooklyn. I disclosed, my voice tinged with concern. As I spoke, I held up the picture Michael had given me. Stephen's reaction was immediate. His eyes widened, and he seemed to choke on his words, his gaze darting around as if seeking an escape. Finally, with a heavy sigh, he seemed to resign himself to the truth. I can't believe Michael caught us, he muttered, his tone a mixture of surprise and resignation. I let myself get carried away. It's unforgivable. My heart sank as his admission sank in. No way, Stephen, I whispered, struggling to comprehend the betrayal. Realizing there was no use in denying it any longer, Stephen began to spill everything. He confessed to starting a relationship with Sarah 6 months prior, swayed by her advances and feelings that now eclipsed those for me. My mind reeled at the revelation. Had their affair begun around the time Michael and Sarah celebrated their 3rd anniversary? Despite my trembling shock, Stephen pressed on with his confession. I want to marry Sarah, Mary. I'm filing for divorce, he declared, his words like a dagger to my already shattered heart. I objected vehemently, my mind spinning with disbelief, but Stephen remained resolute. I can't continue like this. It's over between us. The following day, Stephen failed to return home. His absence was accompanied by a notable absence of his belongings and a finalized divorce decree left on the table. Later, a distraught call from Michael revealed that Sarah had disappeared, taking the divorce papers with her. It seemed she had no intention of coming back. The shock of Stephen and Sarah's sudden elopement left me reeling. That marked the end of my marriage to Stephen a decade ago. After the divorce, we sold our shared home, and I found solace in a new residence closer to my workplace. Initially, the loneliness of my new surroundings weighed heavily on me. Yet, as I immersed myself in my work, I gradually discovered that time had mended my emotional wounds. Teaching proved to be a powerful balm for my emotional wounds, a fact I only realized with hindsight. The steadfast dedication to my fulfilling career played a pivotal role in my healing journey. Continuing to work part-time at the school even after retirement, I found purpose and joy in the daily interactions with both colleagues and students. With each passing day, the weight of Stephen and Sarah's betrayal diminished, replaced by the gratification of nurturing young minds. 10 years on, thoughts of Stephen faded into the background of my life. While my income saw a decline after transitioning to part-time teaching, it remained sufficient for me to stay engaged with the school and the students who held me in high regard. Their affection and admiration filled a void akin to that of a parent. Additionally, I found solace in Michael's resilience, witnessing him throw himself into his work with renewed vigor, having overcome the initial shock of his father's and wife's betrayal. Any semblance of peace I had managed to find shattered with the shrill ring of the phone. Hello, Mary, it's Stephen. His voice pierced the silence, breaking a 10-year hiatus. I never anticipated hearing his voice again, and when I did, a surge of emotions overwhelmed me. What's the purpose of this call? You didn't reach out to reminisce about the past, did you? My words tumbled out with more force than I intended, fueled by years of pent-up resentment. After all, it was Stephen who had insisted on the divorce, leaving me to pick up the pieces. Stephen, ever composed and seemingly indifferent, countered, "Come on now, what's the point of this? Why did you even bother contacting me? You're the reason we're no longer together. I've moved on, Mary. You're not my husband anymore, and I have no interest in seeing you or hearing your voice. Let's cut to the chase, Mary. You're back at your parents', right?" His casual interruption grated on my already frayed nerves, prompting me to raise my voice once more, struggling to contain the surge of emotions stirred by his insensitive and light-hearted tone. Stephen pressed on, oblivious to my turmoil. "Sarah's expecting," he announced, the news hitting me like a freight train. "But raising the child is proving more financially challenging than we anticipated. Making ends meet has become increasingly difficult." According to his account, despite the significant age gap of 30 years, he and Sarah had shared a passionate bond. However, the dynamics shifted when Sarah fell pregnant last year, upending their lives. Both Stephen and Sarah had quit their jobs ahead of the due date, only to find themselves struggling to secure new employment. Forced to scrape by with part-time work, they faced mounting financial strain. With Sarah unable to work following the birth, Their precarious financial situation loomed large. I reached out to Michael and my parents for help, but they all refused. Stephen chuckled over the phone, his words carrying the bitter edge. Stubborn lot, aren't they? His laughter echoed in my mind, conjuring images of Stephen's stern father, determined mother, and sullen younger brother, faces I hadn't seen since their wedding 13 years ago. His family, a portrait of strictness, resolve, and seriousness, had cut ties with me after the divorce. Yet, despite our estrangement, I never imagined Stephen as the type to tolerate infidelity or betrayal within his own family. So, what? You expect me to stay in our old house? I said yes, but first prioritize your relationship with your wife. Your eldest daughter and first grandchild should take precedence over a mere teacher. Leave now. His abusive tone ignited a fierce anger within me. Had my memories of Stephen over the past decade been too idealized? I hadn't anticipated this callousness from him. Then a realization dawned on me. In a subdued voice, I uttered, "I'm sorry, but if you're referring to my parents' house, it's no longer ours." "What do you mean?" Stephen's confusion mirrored my own until I clarified. "Both my parents passed away, Dad 3 years ago, Mom just last year. Their house became too much for me to manage alone, so I sold it. I don't have a house to offer you, Stephen." "Ha. I won't disclose my current address, and even if I did, you're not welcome here. Don't ever show up." Stephen's voice boomed with authority. "What about my inheritance? When your parents pass, should the family home and money come to me?" I frowned, angered by Stephen's cold calculations regarding my parents' demise. It was evident he had his eyes set on not only my funds but also my parents' estate. Despite his mention of familial ties, it was too late for any semblance of trust. I had already received my rightful share from my parents' estate, including their house. My parents had made it clear they wouldn't leave a single cent to a man who shamelessly eloped with their daughter-in-law a decade ago. On the day of our divorce, they were incensed upon learning of Stephen and Sarah's betrayal from Michael and me. Their fury was justified. They had treated Stephen like their own son, only to be repaid with the gravest betrayal. Before their passing, my parents took proactive steps to secure their estate, drafting a will to ensure everything, including our family home, would pass on to me in the event of Sarah's return. 7 years after my father's demise, my mother followed, leaving me the sole inheritor of our family's estate. While reluctant to part with the cherished memories embedded in our home, I honored my parents' wishes and decided to sell it. They hoped it would shelter someone more deserving than Stephen and Sarah. Stephen's reaction was explosive upon learning of this decision. "Don't play dumb. You can't. This is absurd. They wouldn't approve." The inheritance was legally passed down to me, I countered firmly, and their forgiveness isn't something I seek, especially not from Stephen and Sarah, who've done nothing but cause turmoil. Stephen, who had idled away his days, had no business meddling in my affairs. As I gazed at my disconnected phone, I realized Stephen's true colors: someone who would abandon others for his own gain, then lash out when denied. It was a revelation that my ex-husband, with whom I'd shared years of my life, could be so immature. As contempt simmered in my heart, another call came through, this time from Sarah. "You didn't bother to inform me about my own in-laws passing," she accused, her voice dripping with accusation. But her words failed to move me. If Sarah had truly been shocked by my parents' deaths, she would have expressed condolences or a desire to pay her respects. Instead, she immediately steered the conversation towards inheritance, legacy, and money, revealing her true priorities. Neither Sarah nor Stephen deserved a place before my parents' altar. With that thought in mind, I cut Sarah off before she could finish speaking. Later, I received a call from Michael. "Mom, did Dad and Sarah show up at your place?" he inquired. "No, they didn't, but they called, asking about the house and their inheritance," I replied. Michael's voice carried a hint of resignation. "I see. I thought they might reach out, especially after they visited me the other day." "Michael, are you okay? Did they cause any trouble?" I asked, concerned. "I'm fine, Mom, really. They just made a scene at my door. When I threatened to call the police, they took off. But I have an idea." Michael revealed his plan to me, prompting a decision to break the cycle of toxicity between Stephen and Sarah, not just for my own sake, but to safeguard my son as he embarked on a fresh chapter. A few days after putting this plan into action, I received a frantic call from Stephen. "Mary, did you have a hand in this? You're unusually quiet," he blurted out. "Don't play innocent. What's going on?" I demanded. They're on their way to our place, Stephen disclosed. They? Who? I pressed for clarification. Stephen explained that 7 women were en route to their apartment, his unfaithful partners. It appeared he'd been carrying on affairs with 7 other women, in addition to Sarah. Unaware of Stephen's infidelities with 7 other women, Sarah found herself caught off guard by the sudden chaos. As the women erupted in anger, Stephen's frustration grew, directed now at Sarah. The revelation of multiple affairs left me dumbfounded. I knew it was you. How did you uncover my secret? Stephen demanded. I wonder, I retorted, considering I have nothing left after my ex-husband abandoned me for another woman 10 years ago. What? Stephen's shock was palpable. Turning the conversation around, Stephen unleashed a torrent of expletives over the phone, but his outburst failed to faze me in the slightest. As Sarah's distress escalated during our conversation, she hastily packed her belongings, unleashing a heated argument with Stephen, oblivious to my presence on the line. It was a chaotic scene unfolding before my ears, reminding me of the saying, "Things spiral out of control." With a heavy heart, I directed my final words to my ex-husband, though they may have fallen on deaf ears. Farewell, Stephen. Never darken my doorstep or our son's life again. With that, I ended the call. Little did Stephen know, the tumult sparked by the women he had been unfaithful with was the very plan Michael had alluded to. After Stephen and Sarah's tumultuous visit to Michael's home, where they were swiftly turned away, he wasted no time in enlisting the services of a professional detective agency to delve deeper into their affairs. As it turned out, Stephen's infidelity with Sarah had escalated into affairs with 7 other women, 3 of whom were married. Michael promptly relayed this information to me, along with Stephen and Sarah's current address, the very apartment uncovered by the detective agency. With this knowledge in hand, Michael and I coordinated a plan. We informed all 7 women of Stephen and Sarah's whereabouts and directed them to confront the couple simultaneously. The resulting chaos at Stephen and Sarah's apartment grew so intense that law enforcement had to intervene, dispatching police to the scene. Sarah ended her relationship with Stephen, and he found himself facing lawsuits from 3 aggrieved husbands, each demanding alimony payments exceeding 3 figures. Losing Sarah, his home, and his financial stability, Stephen now lives as a homeless individual in a park, struggling to make ends meet. A colleague spotted him seeking assistance at a soup kitchen. Meanwhile, Sarah, facing her own financial burdens, was hit with alimony demands surpassing 3 figures. Forced to borrow money to cover her expenses, she turned to a black market lender, a decision that would soon prove ominous. Shortly after securing the loan, she was forcibly abducted by intimidating individuals in a car, and her whereabouts remain unknown. 10 years have passed, and I've finally reached a final resolution with Stephen. Once again, I've returned to the tranquility of my life. While I remain single, contentment fills me as I immerse myself in the vibrant atmosphere of school. That alone is sufficient for me. In time, Michael found love with a woman who has a child of her own. They are now dating with the intention of marriage. My heart swells with hope that Michael, too, will discover a newfound joy and purpose in life.